I guess the answer if Jesus was not in my life, it would be disaster. If Jesus is in my life, which he is, then everything comes into a sense of peace, knowing that God loves me, God is for me, but he's also for other people. So actually it gives me freedom to say, I'll do what God wants me to do today, and also a total reliance on God rather than it being me. It's all about God and what he does. So that makes it fun.
Amen. Thank you, Steve. So we're at this talk, we're going through a series on Jesus. And this week we're talking about Jesus and Jerusalem. And given the attention of the world on that little stretch of land over the last month or so, you might imagine this could be quite an incendiary talk. But this is not that talk. I just want to say, we will be doing that talk about Israel and the place of Israel and all that, but this is not that talk. I want to talk this morning about Jesus arriving in Jerusalem and what that was about. Because sometimes when if you're new to Jesus, if you're new to reading about him, you read, perhaps you pick up a gospel and you see there's an enormous amount of stuff that he says that feels like judgment is coming. And you kind of look at this guy wandering around, he's healing the sick, he's dealing with people who are oppressed by demonic powers, he's even raising the dead, as we had that story just a moment ago. And so all that seems like really great, and then he tells these stories about how judgment is coming. And you go, I like the nice bits, I like those lovely bits, the kind of kind and gentle Jesus, playing with the kids and all that sort of bit. But he seems to say a lot of stuff, a lot of his stories seem to end up with judgment is coming, and making sense of that, I want to help you out with that process. Because Jesus comes to a particular place at a particular time. There's a reason for that. It's not like you could take the life of Jesus. He could have come anyway. He could have come into 17th century America, or he could have come into 12th century UK. Didn't exist in those days. The whole, could you have just taken this wonderful life, this amazing life, this amazing guy with this amazing message that he had of how to be human? Could you have transplanted him out of that first century Jewish setting and put him anywhere else? Well, the answer is no. His message and his ministry was specific to that people at that time. And again, that's not fully the talk I'm going to give, but I'm going to get somewhere close to that. That would take months. In fact, Halman's writing a book about it when she gets around to it, about how specific every little event, every little thing comes into that focused moment of that last week of his ministry as he arrives in Jerusalem, as he goes through that week and the things that he says to the moment on the Friday when he's hung on a cross, executed, and then comes back into life 3 days later. That was the focal point of history and the focal point of his ministry. And there's no kind of, well, that could have happened any time. Or he could have done it a different way. It all happens in that moment on that day. This is the culmination of his ministry. In fact, they tried to kill him at various other points. There have been moments when it says that they made to kill him because of the things that he was saying. And he said, no, I just walked through, because it wasn't his time and it wasn't his place. He was relaxed. About to throw him off a cliff, and he just walks his way through. This isn't my time, this isn't my place. I know this is not going to happen here. It's going to happen in Jerusalem. Because no prophet is killed outside Jerusalem. They tried to declare him to be king. They tried to say, this is your moment. You've got huge following. The momentum is with us. The newspapers are on your side. The internet's for you. It's all going well. Now's your moment to declare yourself, Jesus. You're going to storm it this moment. And he says, no. It doesn't come in this place, at this time, in this way. I'm scared I'm going to fall off this stage somehow. Let me just move slightly. Didn't realize I was going to do so much walking. Jesus knew that this week, when he arrives in Jerusalem, is his moment. He knew this was the time, this was the method, this was the place. Now, they did not recognize him. They didn't understand what it was going to be, what was going to happen. And you might look at that and think, well, if I'd been there, I'd have understood it. So few of you might think that. Because those of you who've ever done anything, have understood anything of God in your life, it's often really hard to see, isn't it? That God is at work in your life. It's very hard to perceive the way that God does things. That person who's moved into your life who just annoys the heck out of you. And you say, God, will you remove them? And God says nothing. He just lets them irritate you. And irritate you and irritate you until the point where you look back on it years later and you think, actually, God did something in my life. That was God. I thought they were just an annoyance. Or that job that I didn't get, that thing that I thought that was going to be the answer, that was going to really propel me into everything that I believed God had for me, and I didn't get that job. I got this absolutely rubbish job over here. And years later, you come back and you say, actually, God was in that. And there's some things in your life, you're going to just look back from your resurrection life and look back and say, wow, how did God make that happen? Even when I died, I didn't realize how significant that was, how much God was in that. So how much more when God arrives in first century and their expectations, their beliefs, their story led to this great king arriving, dealing with all the problems of their world. He was going to be magnificent and glorious, and he arrives, as you know, the story arrives in a hut, a poor hut in Bethlehem, not in a palace. He arrives and he lives as an outcast. He hasn't got anywhere to lay his head. He doesn't have all the trappings of royal finery. He arrives and yet this is God arriving to deal, to be enthroned as king, and his enthronement happens on a cross, on a Roman execution symbol. Just how easy it would be to miss that. And what he's coming to do is to deal with that generation. I think that's unfortunate, to have lived at that time. Because people have been doing rubbish all that time, for centuries, for generations. That God, that across the world, from Australasia, Asia, Africa, it's not like there was anything special about this particular place at the eastern end of the Mediterranean. And yet, God chose it as a place where he was going to do his work. He chooses one man, Abraham, and he says, I'm going through you, I'm going to concentrate. He didn't say it as explicitly as this, but it just became apparent as the time goes by. And when Paul comes to Romans, he kind of explains it and unpacks it, how God draws together into that place, into that family, a focus for the sin of the world. That in that family, the promises that were going to be given to them and the law that was given to them to understand what it is between right and wrong, what it is to be a people what it is to be a human being who displays the glory of God. He's giving it to that family, and he gives them both promises and a law, and he says, I'm going to focus in the whole sin of the world into your place, into your family, and into your family, I'm going to deal with it. And they hoped that was going to be good news. How foolish they were. That when the sin of the world gets focused in one place, into one family, ultimately, into one generation, and then as we'll learn next week, I presume, Alex, we're going to look at how it focuses onto one man on one day over a period of a few hours where he sucks all the sin of the world into his body on a cross. But Jesus' message to them as he arrives in Jerusalem is judgment is coming on you. You think, that's not fair. That's not fair. Why us? Why us? Well, it's because they had rejected God. God himself had come into their midst. God himself had come. They were longing for God to come. They were longing for that moment when God was going to arrive in his temple again, like it had been in the days of Solomon. Oh my goodness, that was amazing. When even the priests couldn't stand because the presence of God was there. Oh, wouldn't it be great to have those days again? We've sinned and we've rejected him and we've gone there, but God, will you come again and demonstrate what you are to us? We are. God, will you be amongst us again? And he arrives and they go, no, not like that. If God's going to be like that, I don't want any piece of it. If God's going to work like that, I don't want it. I don't want him. And we're going to look this morning for focusing on the beginning of that week. He arrives in Jerusalem. They give him a huge welcome. They lay down their palm branches before him. They lay down their coats before him, and he arrives on a colt, the foal of a donkey, and with a whole load of royal baggage attached to that. This is how kings arrive. This is how they do it. Oh my goodness, he's going to come. He's going to be fantastic and majestic. And what does he do? Well, let's go to Mark chapter 11. Verse 11. He entered Jerusalem, went into the temple. Sorry. Thank you. Mark chapter 11. Verse 11. And he entered Jerusalem, and went into the temple. And when he had looked around everything, as it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. We don't understand this. Think, come on, God has arrived at the temple again. God himself has arrived at the temple, and he looks around. That's a quick scan. Looks at his watch. Says, back tomorrow. On the following day, when they came from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, may no one eat fruit from you again. And his disciples heard it. And you're thinking, Jesus, please, it's not the season for figs. What are you doing here? What's your problem? Were you just hungry? It's hangry? And you just, what was your problem with the fig tree? Well, you've got to understand that the fig tree is a national tree. If you have an English thing, it'd be like an English rose or Welsh leek or daffodil or whatever. It's an identity symbol for the nation. And there are promises of blessing attached to it. Certainly when God comes, he's going to bring them into a fruitfulness of that. So 1 Kings chapter 4. This is what's going to happen is that Judah and Israel lived in safety from Dan even to Beersheba, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, all the days of Solomon. So that's the high point of their story. But then, when things start falling apart, I'm going to skip that. I'll come back to that one. I'm going to run out of time here. It says, would that I would, in Jeremiah chapter 8, it said, would that I would gather them, declares the Lord. There were no grapes on the vine, nor figs on the tree. Even the leaves are withered, and what I gave them has passed away from them. And saying that's what's going to happen. It's a symbol of their failure, a symbol of their rejection of God. That a time is coming when there are going to be no figs on the tree. And Jesus comes and he says, this is that time. Not only is that time, but you're never going to bear fruit again. How horrific that was for them. Jesus declares his judgment on them. He comes to the temple, verse 15. And they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he was teaching them and saying to them, is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. And the chief priests and the scribes heard it and were seeking a way to destroy him, for they feared him because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. And when the evening came, they went out of the city. Again, we've got this promise of this temple being the place where God would come to them, a promise of what it was going to be to the nations. This is the place where God meets, where heaven and earth meet. That's the message of the temple. It's the place where heaven and earth meet, and God comes in the midst of that. And yet, Jesus walks in, as I say, God himself walks in, and he says, this is no longer what that is. This is no longer that place where it's going to be. He declares judgment on the temple. Jeremiah, where are we at? Jeremiah 7:11. It's a bit like the days of Jeremiah. Jeremiah comes at the end, just before the exile, just before the last time that they'd been rejected, they had rejected God. God had sent them into exile. And they said, no, it can be okay because we've got the temple. It's all right. The temple's there. God never leaves us because we've got the temple. And God says, not so fast. Has this house, which is called by my name, become a den of robbers in your eyes? Behold, I myself have seen it, declares the Lord. Zechariah 14:21. Lots of verses this week. And every pot in Jerusalem and every Judah shall be called holy to the Lord of hosts. This is a promise for what's going to come out from beyond that time. So that the sacrifice may come and take hold of them and boil the meat of sacrifice in them. Shall no longer be a trader in the house of the Lord of hosts on that day. Jesus is saying, upon this generation, upon this people, you guys standing in front of me now, I've walked into the temple, and amongst you, this is that moment of judgment coming. This is that moment. And he walks out again, back to Mark again. And they passed by, he goes out of the city the next day, as they passed by in the morning, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. And Peter remembered. He's got a long memory, hasn't he? Even he can manage 2 days. Peter remembered and said to him, "Look, Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered." And Jesus answered them, "Have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him." Now you listen to that, you may have heard that before, and you think, that's a really weird response, Jesus. Do you ever think that? Anybody else with me on that? You think you say, yeah, sure, too right. I can curse a fig tree. It's going down. See what I can do. You know, that's not what he would have done. But his response to say, truly I say to you, whoever says to, have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, "Be taken up and thrown into the sea," and does not doubt in his heart, but believes in what he says, that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for me. Thinking, did I miss something? Did I miss the connection there? At least you probably do if you're a 21st century UK listener. You're thinking, that's a really weird. Are we just now talking about moving mountains? This is a new business you've got us into here, mountain moving kind of thing, and everybody kind of goes with that. Why do we need to move mountains now? Is anybody else with me on that? Has anyone else thought that's a really weird thing to do? Let me open the door. Let me explain. Because he's not referring to just any old mountain. It's not like you can go up to High Down and say, right, I have faith. High Down, be cast into the English Channel. I have faith. Should we try it? This afternoon, it's a nice sunny day. Let's go. No, he's talking about this mountain. That this mountain, which is the Temple Mountain, he's saying this mountain, which is everything that this people expresses about the way that God meets with man, the way that God and man interact, this presence of heaven on earth, this thing is no longer going to be here in this place, but it's going to be cast into the sea of the Gentiles. That's what the sea means. That's where the Gentiles are. It's going to be moved from this place and taken out into the world. And the reason for that is because this generation has shut down God from the world. Step by step by step, by purifying and purifying and purifying, narrowing who was in, who's included. They said no one else gets in. But God was about to work to embrace the whole world, to include you and I, little old us, out here on the far reaches of the world. God was wanting to include us. And so the mountain, the presence of God, gets cast out into the world to include you and me. Judgment had to happen on that generation so that we got included. And it comes through faith. It's a faith thing. That's his message again and again. It's not about what you do. It's not about the keeping some rules or even who your ancestry was, whether your parents or whatever. You can be included because you have faith. And faith is such a simple and yet powerful thing. It's such a difficult thing to drum up in yourself. You think, oh, I need more faith, need lots more faith. I need the sort of faith that's going to move a mountain into the sea. No, you need the faith to say that this man, Jesus, is who he says he was. Through the acts that he did, through the things that he said, I recognize that Jesus is God and that he is powerful enough. And if to wrap up my life into something that will bear fruit, and fruit that everything that I desire for my life, I can find in him. But Jesus comes to this generation, and his enemies just want the status quo, and his supporters want revolution. But he doesn't fit either agenda. And I want you to beware that he doesn't fit your agenda either. He doesn't want to fit into your plans for your life. As I said earlier, you think if I'd got that job, if I had that girl, if I had that guy, if I was smarter, or I was faster, or I was thinner, if I was prettier, if only God had done this or that, all those things, if those things had happened, then my life would be better. If only I had those things, my life would be better. Beware, God is who he is. And who are you to question him? Just like that generation missed the point, missed what God had for them, because they had their own view of the way that God would be. I say to you, beware. Beware, 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 because God is God and you are not. Don't question him or second guess him or challenge him. I don't know whether you've ever seen that clip of Stephen Fry, where he says, that he's giving a reason for why there isn't a God. And he says, if you had a question, if you were able to ask God something, he said, well, there isn't a God. But I'd say to him, childhood cancer. What's with that? Childhood cancer, Stephen Fry. Got that? What's with that? How dare you, God, give a child cancer? The good news for him is, first of all, that the God who does exist allows him to ask that question. There's also the good news that the God who is gave him the compassion for children with cancer. To understand that that's a horrible thing, and not to think, like many other gods who people have worshipped over the years, that that's just the way it is. Well, stuff them. We don't care. But the God who exists, the God who is, has shaped the world so that Stephen Fry thinks that's an issue. But the truth is that the God who is the God who is. And sometimes in life it doesn't make sense. The fact you're not prettier, taller, that you never got that job, you never got that guy, that never happened. The God who is in charge. But the great news is if you give your life, the life that you have, your little insignificant life, if you give it to him, he will take all the pain, all the suffering, and wrap it up in him. He will take out the poison. And he'll bring the judgment that you deserve, the insignificance that you deserve. He'll take it into himself. The news is better than you could have imagined. He takes you, wraps it up in him, so that he will display his glory in your life. And his glory is way beyond any ambition you might have had. You might have thought, well, if I could get that, then I would be happy. How much greater it will be to display the glory of God. The happiness that you seek in that way will be so insignificant compared with displaying the glory of God. So to give your life to him, allow him to take control, will make your little ambitions seem nothing, because he has so much more for you. We're going to take bread and wine in a minute. In fact, do you want the band to come up again? Because we're going to run out of time. While they're coming up, there is a choice you can make. You can say, well, no, I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to go for what God has for me. I'm not going to take the risk because I don't trust him. I think I'm better on my own. Which is exactly the decision that first century Jews did. They said, well, if God's going to come like that, we're not having it. I think we'll be better on our own. Because we've got the temple, we've got all these things, this all looks a lot more secure and stable than trusting this man who's bleeding on a cross. That looks like the failure story. We've got all the good stuff. I'm going to trust in that. And you could make the same choice. With your life, you could say, no, I'm going to make it on my own. Well, my message to you is good luck with that. Because you're going to need it. They chose to reject him, and within a generation, they were crushed not only by the Roman forces that came against them, but actually they ripped each other apart. More died in the Jewish war at their own hands than died from the Romans. Just horrific, because they rejected God. They rejected him when he came to them. He offered them salvation and they chose destruction. And you might think, who would do that? But every day people do. Because of pride, because of fear, just willful disobedience, whatever. And I sympathize with you. You may have been hurt many, many times by religion. You may have been hurt many, many times by other people. You may have been hurt all sorts of ways, but Jesus is the answer. Jesus is the only hope you've got, and you're going to have to take him as he is. Because he's the only one. You can't say, well, Jesus, I'd like you to be a bit different. I'd like you to come in a different form, in a different way. Today, you've got the opportunity to take him in the form of bread and juice. And today, when you take this, so the band's going to play, and I want you to go into those places to go back, sides here, head over there. When you take it, I want you to say, I'm taking you as you are. I trust you with my life. I trust you with my ambitions, that you will come and make something glorious of the little that I have. Will you multiply it? Will you make it glorious? That something significant would come from me because of myself being wrapped up in you. You take Jesus into yourself, and he comes over the whole of you. That's the paradox of this meal thing, is that you take a little bit of Jesus into you, and he just covers you over. He says, I'm going to become part of you, and you're going to become part of me. Your identity is going to be found in me. Jesus, we give ourselves to you. You're our only hope in this world of pain and misunderstanding, of failure and sin. We give ourselves to you because we trust you. You're the only one we can trust. You're the only one who holds all things together. You're the only one who knows right from wrong. You're the only one who knows what's best for us. So we give ourselves to you again. We give ourselves to you for this week, for this month, for this year, for this world, for this life. Amen.